buy the right products at a store with the amount of money you have. And the products are what you need in order for a party, or lunch, or so you can even have the kids all selling the products to others, so they're practicing being a cashier or a store, owner, or you're the customer. Little kids, buying products and deciding what they need in order for them to have lunch, and then even going to the point of having lunch and everyone sitting there learning how to eat properly, and this is all part of the laboratory school. That you're actually teaching people through activities, and that's a much better way of raising children so that they grow up with an education that is practical. It's not memorizing facts that they might not ever use. This is instead trying to teach them how to solve problems in the real world the way that they're going to experience it, right? Well, this is considered progressive education, partly. I mean, where progressive education goes eventually, you might say it got lost. And there are a lot of folks that will even argue that Dewey's theory of education actually destroyed American education. Well, that's kind of silly. But you've probably grown up with this kind of thing. How many of you did science projects when you were in grammar school? Everybody, right? And notice the science project, you were basically structuring it the same as his theory of inquiry. Here's my hypothesis, right? You have probably had to put on your poster, right? I took, magnetic filings and I put them on the piece of paper, and underneath that I ran my magnets and saw the iron filings all moving around in this kind of a pattern. Or if I just lay them on top of the magnet, I saw the iron filings forming a design that basically showed the magnetic poles of the magnets. Right? You're using the theory of inquiry through specific issues that you can then not only learn about magnets and magnetism and things of that sort, but you're learning how to do problem solving and understanding your experience, right? So all of this is pragmatism in education, and Dewey is the one that introduced that. And not only to the United States, by the way. Dewey's theory of education was so popular that even people like Leo Tolstoy in Russia, right, the author, War and Peace, Anna Karenina, invited John Dewey to come to Russia to help teach people what the process was all about. He did actually go to Russia, and one of the reasons he went there was because at the time he was a liberal, and he was thrilled with the idea of communism, and he thought that Russia was probably a great example of how communism was the next step. And he got there, and like many other intellectuals that visited Russia during that time period, discovered that it was horrible. It was exactly the opposite of what progress would be like. And so that kind of visitation to Russia at the time of, I guess by then it was Stalin, was basically a horror show. And they came back completely reformed and thought, no, forget communism. That's terrible. Don't even think about it. But he also went to China, he went to Europe, he visited lots of places teaching about his educational process. And one of the things I discovered doing my thesis, which was on Hegel's philosophy, but I realized that how it influenced Dewey, and Dewey then influenced others through education. And one of the ones he influenced was Ludwig Wittgenstein. So I'm going to mention him now a little bit, if I may. Granted, he's European born in Austria. His father was the richest man in Europe at the time. His family was a large one. He was expected, though, to eventually take over the job of running the family business. So he went to school as an engineer and so on. In school, though, he got interested in Bertrand Russell and Gottlob Frege's theories of transforming language into a more logical, structured language so that the ambiguities in human communications could be reduced. And so he ended up studying in Manchester, where he was studying flight as part of his engineering training. In fact, while he was at Manchester, England, studying flight, balloons and things, he also came up with a theory for a jet engine, which actually would have worked, except that the planes were basically made out of light wood at the time. It would have destroyed the plane it was on. But in any case, he met Bertrand Russell and said to Bertrand Russell, "Here, read this. If it's any good, I'll become a philosopher. If it isn't, I'll be a pilot." And Bertrand Russell read it, and the next time they met, he said to him, "Don't be a pilot." Now, Wittgenstein interpreted that to mean to be a philosopher. My reading of it is, no, just don't be a pilot. You'd be a scary as heck pilot. We don't want that. However, he ends up then becoming a philosopher. And his PhD thesis, accepted by Bertrand Russell for his degree, was the text, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, which explored the problems that Bertrand Russell was dealing with in his Principia Mathematica. In any case, he thought he solved all the problems of philosophy at that point, and as a result of that, he gave up philosophy. He was done. He solved everything. Well, he ended up in the war, first World War I. He was in the artillery for the Austrians. You got to be careful. Why do I always mix up Australia and Austria? He was Austrian, so he was in the Austrian artillery. He was captured by the Italians and ended up in a prisoner of war camp with the Italians for, I guess, about a year or so. While he's in that, he ends up, that's actually part of the time that he wrote the Tractatus. But once he's finished that, and he is finished with his PhD, he then moves on to learning about education because he decides he's going to become a teacher. And the text that he was carrying around with him was How We Think by John Dewey, which is another book that explains ways of using the Hegelian dialectical process to explore how we think. And so he becomes influenced by John Dewey, becomes a Hegelian, and as a result of that, he realizes that there's lots of things he didn't cover in the Tractatus, and he goes back. And eventually he's going to have a second book published, although it's post-mortem, and that is the Philosophical Investigations. But as a result of these two experiences, we have two theories of language that become part of the analytic school, especially in England, but also in the United States. And that first one is the one that's really Bertrand Russell's theory, and his Tractatus supports Bertrand Russell's theory. But the second one, which is based on the Philosophical Investigations, is Hegelian and based on Dewey's theories of how we think, and explores multiple language games. And these language games, of course, are dialectical, evolving, language that's attached to a particular form of life. So what happens with Wittgenstein, let me get back to the Philosophical Investigations. You can see oh, by the way, should be an interesting picture here that shows that in class in Linz, he was in the same class that Adolf Hitler was in. Let's see that picture. But there is a pic. Oh, here it is. So this is. Not sure which is which. Let's explore it a little bit. So the third from the right is a student who's believed to be Wittgenstein. I don't know which one that is, but is this one Hitler? Is that what that says? Young Adolf Hitler in the last row on the right? Oh, here he is. Here he is. So that's Hitler, except for the mustache. Notice he doesn't have the mustache yet. And there's Wittgenstein. So that's kind of interesting. However, let me get down. Studying flight, arrival at Cambridge. He was hard to deal with, by the way. The easiest way to think about it is that he was very autistic. Completion of the Tractatus, teaching posts. By the way, there's only 7 sentences in the Tractatus, and all the other ones are explanations of those 7 statements. And the most famous one is, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. And the Germans made a lot of fun out of that one. They even have a song. That's just crazy. He made a house. That's amazing. How big is this? These, with the Wikipedia articles tend to grow. Isn't that amazing how that happens? So here we go. Philosophical investigation. So in the philosophical investigations, what you have is the idea that there are language games. Language games are attached to particular forms of life. As an example, if I go to cars to go grocery shopping, there's all kinds of vocabulary that I have learned from being a shopper at supermarkets in general, but cars in particular, so that as I'm going up and down the aisles, I might see a sale sign on oranges. That means these oranges are on sale. I happen to understand grocery store speak, so I know that that means these particular oranges are cheaper than they normally would be. In fact, the sign might even say, usually this much per pound, now this much. So I know how much they're on sale. I also know that the vegetables right next to it are still on sale. It's just they're not on sale. See what I mean? Right? That's very peculiar about the way grocery stores work, right? I know all the vocabulary associated with grocery cart. Do you want a bag? That means 10 cents extra. There's all kinds. So notice it's not the same as it was 10 years ago. The vocabulary in these stores have changed. Genetically modified products and so on. Think about all the different vocabulary you use in that particular environment that you wouldn't use, say, for example, if you went to the hospital. So if I went into the hospital up to the information desk and said, are you going to have a sale on heart attacks anytime soon? That's just totally off the wall and inappropriate, right? Because they don't talk that way in a hospital, because heart attacks don't go on sale. Stents? You have stents on sale, a reduction? So you've got too many stents and you want to sell them quickly? No, that doesn't happen. It's totally different speak in a hospital, right? And you can think about that associated with any kind of these forms of life that he's describing, basically, and realize that there's vocabulary associated with the physical process of being in that form of life and how it works. He also refers to them having grammar, specific grammar associated with that particular form of life. And this is quite powerful, and this way of looking at language is referred to as ordinary language analysis. So if we go